All right, welcome back to the Copywriters podcast with your host, the world's greatest copywriting coach, David Garfinkel. David, how you doing today?
I'm good, Nathan. How are you?
Man, I am excited about today's episode because we have a guest who I've been following for a long time and I see as a pioneer in a lot of this stuff that we talk about on the show. So I'm just going to sit back and enjoy and absorb as much as I can today.
Sounds good. So, yeah, I agree with what you said. One name comes up more than any other when I talk to people about copywriting and AI. That name is Sam Woods, and he's our
Wow.
special guest today. Um, Sam has been in the game for 9 years, and most of us haven't been there half as long. I've been there about one ninth as long. I don't know of anyone who's been in it longer than Sam has. He got started with machine learning in 2016 and generative AI in 2019. He was a pioneer in prompt engineering for AI copywriting and marketing. And he's gone outside of our little world of direct response, entrepreneurial copywriting, and selling newsletters and so forth. He's advised Fortune 1000 companies and teams across the world, as well as advised and consulted with CEOs and other C suite executives. And Sam describes himself as a strategic AI architect who advises C suite leaders on turning artificial intelligence into their most powerful competitive advantage. Pretty good.
Yeah.
But most important to us, he's a seasoned and successful expert using AI for writing copy that gets results. So before we start the interview, let me remind you copy is powerful. You're responsible for how you use what you hear in this podcast. And most of the time, common sense is all you need. But if you make extreme claims and or if you're writing copy for offers in highly regulated industries like health, finance, and business opportunity, you may want to get a legal review after you write and before you start using your copy. My larger clients do this all the time. So, Sam, welcome and thanks for joining us. Really appreciate having you here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be invited and to speak with you. I don't think we've ever spoken either in person or online, but I've certainly heard your podcast a number of episodes over the years, so sort of familiar with what you're doing.
Great. Well, let's dive right in, shall we? So, what would you say is the most important thing about AI that most people in marketing and copywriting just haven't realized yet, haven't grasped yet?
Where do I begin? There's probably a lot of things. The work I do tend to be on the very bleeding edge of things.
Mhm.
So I think the most important thing for people to pay attention to, I would say, over the next couple of years is just how much of the work that we do, the work that goes into copywriting, aside from the creative, analytical in our minds as we look for big ideas and so on, aside from that, there's a lot of labor that goes into copywriting or marketing. There's, if it's especially if it's online, right? There's using software, clicking buttons, moving information from one document to another document, and most of that, about maybe up to like 95%, 90% of it can be automated with the help of AI models, which for some people, they say that, oh, it'll free me up to do more high level thinking or work and strategic planning, looking at campaigns and trying to, taking the experience of being a copywriter and trying to apply it to the work you do. But I would argue that the work is not necessarily going to go away, it's just going to change. So I'm not sure how much high level work copywriters will end up doing because it'll maybe give you 5 hours back. And unless you use those 5 hours in a good way, like you're not maybe necessarily adding value, you're just finding something else to distract yourself with. So I think the labor can be automated, most of it. Maybe it'll give you time, but if you don't use that time in a good way, and if you don't have good inputs into your own mind, then it's just going to be a waste of time.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, that sort of reminds me of well, it's I think it's kind of like the Peter Principle, and it's also what writers know about deadlines. You know, the amount of time task takes sort of expands to how far ahead the deadline is. So you have to be really disciplined to actually take advantage of those 5 hours and
Yeah.
be more productive, make more money, whatever.
Yeah. And I don't know how disciplined copywriters are. Some are, I think, but often the copywriters I know, they might poke around with a project for a couple of days and not seem to get very far, and then they'll get a ton done in a day, and then they'll mull around for another couple of days. So the way people work, I think, is either going to help some people be more productive and be more effective and produce higher quality work, but for others, I think it'll be a struggle.
Yeah. And I would say a lot of those mechanical things, I mean, they may be fun procrastination for some people. They drive me crazy. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to have it, move the text from A to B, or to analyze the numbers for me and give me a bottom line, do all that stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Everyone's going to affect it differently. That's great. So let's go way back to 2016, 2019 just for a second, okay?
Yeah.
You got started with AI and machine learning so much earlier than most people, as best I can tell. You may know differently, but as best I can tell, especially in the copywriting field,
Sure.
what caught your attention? Why did you jump in so early?
At the time in 2016, I had an agency where we mostly did conversion rate optimization. So we would do split testing, multivariate testing, online campaigns, mostly paid ads, just because the feedback loop is shorter. You get faster feedback on paid ads than on many other forms.
Hmm.
So we did that, and that included, anything from optimizing ads to full packages, full funnels, sales pages, all that stuff, which also involved a lot of copywriting. And at the time, we were working with Amazon on a project, and I was in a meeting with one of their machine learning scientists, so someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And and we had a pretty good meeting, and because we were discussing predictive modeling and forecasting of metrics, and simulating how well or poorly a funnel would convert, right?
Hmm.
And so
Okay.
that's machine learning. It's just very data analytics heavy. And as I was talking to him and we had a pretty good conversation, he looks at me and he says, like, just so you know, Sam, most text-based marketing, including copywriting, will be solved by large language models, or what will become large language models in about 5 years, he goes, which would be about 2021.
Uh,
And I asked him to explain, and he just went into a long technical explanation that at the time I have no idea what he's talking about. But I recorded the conversation, and then I went off to try to understand what he was telling me, because he started to explain to me the work that was happening on a very technical side on how large language models are built. And at the time, is very like there wasn't really large language models at the time the way we know about them today. So it was early, but not early in the machine learning sense. Like, machine learning has been around for a very long time. It's nothing new. But the way that turned into large language models and eventually image models was at the time fairly new. So anyway, that put me on the path of trying to understand what he was talking about and trying to grasp just exactly what's coming, and like who's doing what. Because at the time there were just some AI research labs. They weren't very public. OpenAI was just very new at the time. So it was very early in that sense, but the technique wasn't early. It has been around. So that put me on that path. And then we started incorporating machine learning more and more into the work we did for conversion rate optimization. And then in 2019, just because I know people in the industry, in 2019, I got early access to GPT-2 when it came out. And
mhm.
then in 2020, GPT-3 comes out, like beta access very early. And like GPT-3 then compared to now is like Stone Age, but at the time it was um, it was confusing to type in text in a window, and it wasn't a chat interface at the time. It was like a very rudimentary box that you put text in and you got text back. And I started putting text in, and I started getting text back in like sentences or short messages, not the long messages we get now. And I thought this is insane, because if this is how it looks now, like it's only a matter of time before it becomes better. And when I started getting actual good copy back and then tested it in the wild, like took just copy from the GPT-3 and ran campaigns and ad campaigns and so on with it, and it converted as good as or better than human copy. I thought, okay, here we are.
And what point on the timeline was that when it started converting as well as or better in human copy?
2020.
Wow.
GPT-3 copy at the time, which, so it was, you could only get access to it if you either had a tool that you were building, as you do API calls, or you just got API call access and they had a playground inside your account where you could just experiment with it, right? And so it could only do short form at the time because it was just very short text back. You could, through just API calls, have it write sales pages, but it was just a ton of messages to get it to write a full sales page or a landing page because it's just long form, right?
Sure.
But truly, like, I ran experiments at the time and I spent a lot of my money and client money on testing AI copy that was just purely written from input to GPT-3, and then the output we just took, put it into ads and emails, short form, and just like it was written by a human being, it either beat the control or didn't, just like any test. But then as we got more familiar with it, it started to beat the control more and more and more. And already at the time, you could have short form copy done that converted and beat the control sometimes, like 6 out of 10 or something like that.
Yeah. I'd like to explore one variable there. Input.
Yeah.
How important was how informed the input was and how experienced a copywriter and a marketer and a CRO expert, how important was that as for the person putting in the input?
Kind of important at the time. It's become less important now, but at the time it was pretty important, kind of important in the sense that there were no magic words somehow that would unlock the copy from GPT-3, because these models, they do a very good job of just mimicking. And
Hmm.
so what I discovered early on was, oh, like, I don't need a long prompt. I don't need a complicated prompt. I just need to give it the right example of something that I'm looking for, and then tell it that I want something like this, but then change the offer or change specific call to action. And then it would just replicate a good performing piece of copy. So it was like, there was no need for what people call mega prompts. There was no need for it. All you had to do was provide a good example or two, and it would just mimic it with your adjustments.
Okay, that's good. So let's talk about what you've done to the degree that you can. I know there's
Sure.
non-disclosure and discretion and all
Yeah.
that, but to the degree that you can, could you talk about what you've done for individual copywriters, for copy teams, and for
Sure.
large organizations?
Yeah.
Copy.
It's been it's been a mixture of training, coaching, and then building what I would just call AI systems, which is a combination of different models in different workflows and different settings that produces copy from input, whether it's input from another copywriter or is a system that like automatically scrapes and gathers the last 7 days of news stories for your industry, and then those news stories become the trigger point for new copy being written, short
Hmm.
form or something else. So on the training and coaching side, it's just been a lot of showing people what's possible and helping them understand what these models are. Because once you do, it becomes very easy to talk to it in the way you need to talk to it to get the copy that you need.
Sure.
So it's been, you know, anything from here's how to write emails, to write sales pages, to write full promotion packages, to writing whatever, any kind of copy. And some of the best ways to leverage it. It's now it's easier to use it than it was even 2 years ago, because for ChatGPT or Claude, especially, those are the most common models. You now have the ability to, for example, set up projects inside one of these tools, and that can just act, and you can give it a system prompt or instruction, and that can act as whatever role you need to act as, and you can provide examples, you can upload files. Like 2 years ago, that wasn't the case, and you had to provide a lot of information in a prompt and hope that you didn't run out of the context size window. But now it's super easy to, like, you don't even need, like, there's so many content copy AI copywriting tools out there, like a gazillion probably at this point, but they're all the same, more or less, because the API calls tap into either a GPT model or a Claude model or some other large language model.
Mhm.
So it's just become easier. And all I've tried to show people is, like, here, like, you have this interface. If you use the web version, here are the files you should include as examples or templates or structure that you want to call upon. Here's a good system prompt to use for a project or a bot. And then when you have the conversation in the chat window, you don't need to provide any long mega prompt stuff. That I disagree with that, but that's a rabbit trail. So you can just have a natural conversation and get the copy that you need because you provided the context needed to get the output that looks good. So that's been on the training side. And then for the companies that want it and can do it, it brings me no joy to say this because I love copywriting and I still read magalogs from my swipe file and so on. But it's
Yeah.
possible to build full AI copywriting systems that has a human input and then just a human quality review at the end if needed. And then everything in between can be done by AI models. And that's writing any copy for any purpose. And there's no, it captures style, it captures voice, it captures all the different nuances that you want to be there. And those systems can pretty easily be built. And which means that some companies go, why am I paying 5 copywriters when I just need to pay 1 to basically manage the robots? So
Okay.
it's, I'm not thrilled about situations like that, but I recognize that that's possible to do.
Fair enough. So let's go down from the system and culture of companies to the individuals. What have you observed, especially people who haven't worked with you, that copywriters are doing right when they use AI, and what would you say they're doing wrong?
The wrong thing is probably easiest. A bunch of things come to mind. So what I've noticed is um, people have a natural skepticism towards AI, and for good reasons. And it's not a bad thing to have skepticism. But what happens is whenever they get output from a prompt or something else, there's a natural tendency to go, yeah, this isn't good enough, or like, oh, this is wrong and this is wrong, and to be pretty critical. But through the spend of not my own money necessarily, but with clients and or myself of a few $1 million, uh, robot copy, AI copy converts without human editing, right? And so, but just because people see it in the context of a chat window with like ChatGPT or Claude, automatically they go, oh, this isn't good enough. But I almost promise you, if they just took it as is, put it into an ad and let it do its thing, it will probably convert, right? So our view is skewed when we see it in the chat window, when we become more critical than need to be, and our
Mhm.
mind hallucinates things that are wrong with the copy, even though there's nothing wrong with the copy, and it would convert. So that's one thing. The other thing is thinking that you need to have all these fancy mega prompts or a very long form prompt or something else. And like through the only way to know if your prompt is good is to set benchmarks and run an evaluation. And most people don't know, and they don't know how to do it, and they don't know you should do that to actually evaluate whether your prompt makes a difference or not. Because I can guarantee you that if you have a 1,000-word prompt and you get output from it, you could probably at least slash that in half and you'd see no drop in quality of output because it includes a lot of extra information that is not needed, not necessary, and actually sidetracks the model. And
Hmm.
if you do this in a chat window, you're going to run into context size window where you're actually using up all the tokens in your big prompt. And it just, therefore, the output, there's less prompts available, less tokens for the model to get back to you. So I know that mega prompts were a thing. Maybe they still are a thing. I don't know. Um, but they're actually often detrimental. And you're better off setting up a project inside Claude or ChatGPT or using a bot inside Poe.com with a system instruction. That's
Yeah,
better than just putting in big ass prompts into a chat window and hoping for the best.
Nathan.
Uh, One thing that I have come accustomed to is when I do have a big, giant, long prompt, generally I'll just ask ChatGPT, hey, I know I'm probably over explaining and being too wordy
Sure.
here. Can you take the main idea and condense it down into a prompt that is efficient? And it
Yeah.
blows my mind. And like you said, I don't
Yeah.
notice a drop in quality when I have it redo the prompt for me.
Yeah. And I know why that happens where people think that they need a mega prompt. It's so these models are, they're many things, but one thing that they are very good at is cold reading. So it'll say things to you that sound very plausible and very correct, and you with your mind just take it as, oh shit, like this model knows me. It doesn't know you in a knowing kind of a sense. It's if your information was part of the training data, then all it knows is to retrieve it, but it doesn't actually know you. And so they're excellent cold readers. And us as human beings, we function the same way where we're like in some ways we're like a large language model where we love to be verbose in some way and we love to construct linguistic structures that we think make a difference to a model, but at the end of the day it doesn't make a difference to the model. You could have just slashed that prompt in half or more and you still get good results. So those are things on the wrong side of things, right? On the right side of things, if people, I think the biggest gain that I've seen copywriters get is having a conversation like they're talking to a fellow copywriter and assuming that the model is a fellow copywriter. And through conversation, which is the best way to prompt the model, but through conversation, what happens is if you ask it to ask you questions and
Mm.
to push you on your assumptions about a piece of copy or a big idea, having it ask you and you respond as if you are in a conversation, I see a lot of copywriters get to the big idea faster, get to a good headline deck faster, get to a good offer faster and more robust. Like their offer is better because they had a conversation with a model about it first, as opposed to just trying to come up with all of it on their own, or even looking at swipe files. Like swipe files are useful, they're very good. But if it's just you in a room with a pile of swipe files, there's a limit to your cognitive ability and also just like ideation happens in conversation. It's very hard for a single human being to on their own out of nothing ex nihilo, like out of nothing, just come up with something.
Mhm.
It could happen, but it requires a lot of cognitive work and a lot of mental energy. So it's better to just have a conversation with a model, not for the sake of having it write copy, but just to help you like step outside of yourself, hear a different viewpoint, and then telling the model to take on different hats of thinking. Like, what's his name? Edward de Bono or something? I
Yeah,
forget.
that's
Different
right. Five
thinking
types of
hats.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, you just using that model framework to have the model prompt you is far more useful than just going write me 10 emails. Like it's you have this. There's always going to be a place for human thinking, creativity, and ideation, and all of that. And you can just have these models draw it out of you, where
Hmm.
before it might be hard for you to do it on your own, if that
That,
makes
that's
sense.
that's that's such great advice. Yeah, and I've haven't been as aware of it as you just made me with the way you articulated it, but that's where I've had most success too.
Yeah.
I think we got time for one more question. What's the best way for someone to get up to speed, or even just to get better using AI for copywriting?
Curate your swipe files. Make sure you have winners in there and not just 50 sales pages. You want the winners, and use that more than big prompts. So it's better to give good solid examples of what you're trying to have done, and then just instruct ChatGPT or Claude on what you want to see changed, because they're so good at mimicking endlessly that you'll cut a lot of time and a lot of work just by giving it three solid examples of something that you want. They can't be too different because then you'll confuse the model. But if you have, like, let's say, three emails that are similar and they're all like high performers, and you know why they perform, like you can look at them, you can tell that, okay, the subject line is solid, the call to action is perfect, then just use that as examples and say, I need an email like these three, but for this other product or offer and this other person, in a different voice and style. And here's a short example of the voice and style of the person that I'm looking to emulate. That in a prompt, upload simple instructions will get you better output faster than doing something more elaborate. There's a time and place for the elaborate, but you can very quickly, within a couple of minutes, just get really good copy with very little input.
That's really amazing advice. I lied. I got time for one more question. Where do you see this going 1 to 5 years down the road?
Within 5 years, you can have an autonomous business that runs 95% of what you do, especially if you're a freelancer or agency and you provide a service of copywriting or something adjacent to it. There's no need why most of your operations and labor cannot be and should not be autonomous and self-driving. And if you have a self-driving business, then you choose when to take the wheel, right? It's up to you when to take the wheel. Yeah. And maybe you have preferences. So that's within 5 years. That'll be it's a reality now, but I think it'll be common within 5 years. 3 years, I think we'll see. It's not quite a plateau in models, but with the existing structures and architecture that exists for models now, I think we're getting to the point where, with existing infrastructure and architecture, we're going to hit a point where improvement is going to be hard to get. But at the same time, I think more use cases and understanding of how to use these models will grow. So the power of them and the benefits of them is not going to decrease. It's only going to increase, even if on the very technical side of things we hit like a plateau of some kind, until they figure out a different architecture for models. Then we'll see another upswing in performance, but I think we'll reach that within the next year. I think the next year is going to be a mixture of hilarious and tragic at the same time. I think it'll become more common for most people to realize that most of what they see online is probably fake. And most of what they read or see is just AI stuff, even though they look at it and they can't tell. So it won't be like cartoon videos. It'll be like you and me talking, but it'll all be AI made. And so I think the mainstream, the larger group of people who don't quite know, they've heard about ChatGPT, maybe they've used it off and on, but I think most of them don't realize that I can already create clones of either myself or other people and make videos and audio and text that you cannot tell is not a real person. And I think that's only going to explode as more people realize just how simple it is. So I think my hope, which is a far-fetched, it'll never happen, but my hope is that most people will sour on the internet and choose to spend time offline more than online. But
there you go. That's an idea. I like that. Yeah. Hi, Nathan.
I'm just gonna top it off with saying, I think that the adoption of AI is going to dramatically increase over the next year. I've already seen steadfast, hard, in the paint copywriters that were very anti AI a year ago, and now they're finally jumping on board. And so I think that we are going to see an explosion of what you mentioned. Also, that's going to lead to an increase in skepticism, which means it's going to kind of weed out who's really good at it and who's not really good at it. And I'm just going to finish by saying I've been following you for a long time, and you have been kind of at the forefront. You've been one of the guys that really understood it and was teaching people how to be good at it. You were talking about how to do things that now agents and like
Yeah.
Operator and Manus and all of these tools, you were talking about how to do this back when ChatGPT 3 was just becoming available. And so
Yeah.
um, I would say last recommendation, follow you. You're one of the guys that I make an effort to stay inside of what you've got going on. And so for the listeners that want to heed that advice, what's the best way to follow you?
Well, first of all, thank you for those kind words, Nathan. It's I feel embarrassed because I don't people saying nice things to me is so uncommon that it always throws me off. So so thank you for that. It's very kind of
Yeah,
you.
but we're not trying to negotiate price with you. So I can see that.
I think well, I'm not super active online. I'm kind of busy with things as they are. But bionicbusiness.com if you are interested in just understanding better how to use AI inside a business, no matter what kind of business it is. But for copywriting specifically, I have a partner with a friend of mine on copywriting.ai. So I bought copywriting.ai as a domain back in 2017
Wow.
because I could see what was coming. So like I've had it for what is it now, 8 years or something like that, 7 years, 8 years. So, but there, if you go there, it just started. A friend of mine is running it. I'm advising it, and so on. But it's early, it's new, but it'll focus on just open sourcing as much how-to on AI copywriting as possible, specifically, right? So if you only care about copywriting, like that's where to go. But if you care about business, then it's bionicbusiness.com.
That's
All right. And
great.
do you have a personal website where people can follow you as well?
Yeah, it's not very updated. It's samueljwoods.com.
All right, awesome. We'll make sure to put links in the show notes for this episode. You can find this episode show notes over at copywriterspodcast.com. And man, thank you so much for coming on, dropping a wealth of knowledge. It
Sure.
feels like the interview just flew by. Maybe we'll have to twist your arm and get you on again in the future.
Anytime.
And
Anytime.
until
Oh,
next
thank you,
time,
Sam.
yeah, until next time, we will catch you later.